Emily had always lived in small towns. Her life had been quiet, simple, and filled with routines she knew well. But when her mother decided to move to a new city after her father passed away, everything changed. For Emily, the new beginning felt uncertain and heavy. She carried memories of her father everywhere she went, and she had only one real source of comfort left: her German shepherd Rex. He had been trained by her father, and he stayed close to her like a shadow. To Emily, Rex was more than just a dog. He was her best friend, her guardian, and her last connection to her old life. The first day at the new school started with nervous footsteps. Emily's mother drove her to the tall building that looked bigger than any school she had ever seen. Students crowded the entrance, laughing and talking loudly, already grouped in familiar circles. Emily felt small, clutching the strap of her backpack. Rex sat in the car for now, his sharp eyes watching her carefully, almost as if he understood that this day mattered. Inside, Emily walked to the office to get her schedule. The secretary gave her a polite smile, but she felt the weight of curious eyes from students passing by. New faces, new hallways, and new rules, it all felt overwhelming. She kept her head down, hoping not to attract too much attention. In her first class, the teacher introduced her. "Everyone, this is Emily. She just moved here, so let's make her feel welcome." A few students smiled faintly, but most turned back to their own friends, uninterested. Emily sat at the far corner of the room, listening quietly. She noticed that some students whispered, sneaking glances at her. She didn't know what they were saying, but she could guess. Being new often meant being different, and different always caught attention. At lunch, Emily walked to the cafeteria. She carried her tray, looking for a place to sit. Almost every table was filled with groups laughing and talking. Emily spotted an empty corner table and quickly sat down. She ate quietly, staring at her food. She missed her old friends, the familiar cafeteria, and even the small-town gossip she used to hear. This place felt so big, and she felt invisible in the middle of it. But she wasn't invisible for long. A tall boy with an arrogant smile walked past her table, followed by a group of students who seemed to treat him like a leader. His name was Chad, and everyone in the school knew him. His family was wealthy, and he always carried himself as if he owned everything he saw. Chad noticed Emily sitting alone and smirked. "Hey, new girl," he said loudly, making sure others heard. "You lost or something? That's the loner table." His friends laughed, adding small jokes of their own. Emily didn't respond. She kept her eyes on her tray, wishing they would walk away. Chad didn't stop. He leaned closer, tapping her tray with his finger. "What's wrong?" "Cat got your tongue." His friends laughed again, and Emily felt her cheeks grow warm. She wanted to defend herself, but she remembered her mother's words that morning. "Just keep your head down until you settle in." So she said nothing. After a few moments, Chad lost interest and walked away, leaving behind a trail of laughter. Emily sighed in relief. She finished her lunch quickly and left the cafeteria before the bell rang. That evening, as she walked home with Rex, she told him softly about her day. "I think they don't like me already," she whispered, patting his strong back. Rex wagged his tail and leaned against her as if to say he was there for her. The next day wasn't much better. In the hallways, Emily noticed Chad's group watching her. Sometimes they whispered and pointed, and other times they made rude jokes just loud enough for her to hear. Emily pretended not to notice, but it stung. She focused on her studies, hoping teachers would see her effort. One afternoon, Emily decided to bring Rex with her when she walked to school. She tied his leash and walked proudly beside him. Rex's presence gave her courage. He was tall, muscular, and calm, with alert eyes that noticed everything. Other students turned their heads as she passed, whispering about the big German shepherd. Some looked impressed, others looked wary. Chad and his friends noticed too. "Look at that monster," one of them joked. "She probably needs him because she's scared." They laughed, but Emily ignored them and walked on. During lunch that day, Emily sat outside with Rex by her side. She shared her sandwich with him, and for the first time since moving, she smiled. Having Rex there reminded her she wasn't truly alone. But Chad wasn't done with his games. He and his friends spotted her in the courtyard. "Oh, look, the new girl brought her babysitter," Chad mocked, pointing at Rex. His friends chuckled and picked up small stones from the ground, tossing them lightly near Rex. The dog's ears perked up, and his eyes grew sharp, but he didn't move. Emily looked at them firmly. "Stop it," she said in a calm but strong voice. Chad raised his eyebrows, surprised that she spoke. Or what? He taunted. Emily didn't reply. She placed her hand on Rex's head and he immediately relaxed again. Chad and his friends eventually grew bored and walked away, but not before making jokes about how she needed a dog to protect her. Emily exhaled, relieved that Rex stayed calm. She knew, though, that the bullies would not stop there. That night, she sat in her room and thought about her father. He had always told her that strength didn't mean fighting back. It meant knowing when to stand tall. Emily realized she couldn't run from the bullies forever. She didn't know how, but she believed that one day soon, Chad would push too far, and Rex would not sit quietly anymore. As she lay in bed, Rex curled up near her door, watching over her like always. For the first time since moving, Emily felt a spark of hope. She was still the quiet new girl, but she wasn't as helpless as the bullies thought. She had Rex, and together they would face whatever came next. Emily woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. The thought of going back to school filled her with worry, but she reminded herself that Rex would be waiting for her when she returned. He had been her steady comfort through the rough days, and she knew she could face anything as long as he was there to greet her. Still, the sting of yesterday's laughter and the cruel words of Chad and his friends stayed fresh in her mind. She got dressed quietly, packed her books, and walked out the door. Rex followed her to the edge of the street, wagging his tail as if to tell her he trusted her to be strong. At school, Emily tried to blend in like before. She kept her head down and focused on her classes, hoping to avoid any trouble. But the more she tried to disappear, the more attention she seemed to attract. Chad and his group had decided she was an easy target, and they weren't ready to let her go. They spotted her in the hallway and smirked at one another. "There's the new girl," one of them said loudly, making sure everyone around could hear. "I bet she talks to her dog more than she talks to people." Laughter echoed through the hallway, and Emily felt her cheeks burn. She walked faster, clutching her books tightly against her chest. The bullies didn't stop there. During lunch, when Emily found her quiet corner table again, she discovered something that made her heart sink. Her backpack, which she had left in her locker before heading to the cafeteria, had been opened. The zipper was undone, and when she pulled it out, she found her notebooks torn and scribbled over with messy, insulting words. Some pages had been ripped out and crumpled, while others had been drawn on with childish pictures meant to mock her. She stood frozen for a moment, staring at the mess. Her hands trembled as she tried to gather her ruined things. She didn't want to cry in front of anyone. She didn't want to give the bullies the satisfaction of seeing her break. Around her, some students glanced at her, but no one said anything. Some looked sympathetic, others looked away quickly, not wanting to get involved. Emily kept her head low and walked out to the courtyard, where Rex was waiting with her mother, who sometimes brought him during lunch so Emily could see him. When Rex saw her, his ears perked up and he walked straight to her, sensing her sadness. She sat on the bench and hugged Rex tightly, burying her face in his fur. "They ruined my things," she whispered, her voice shaking. Rex didn't understand the words, but he felt her pain. He leaned against her, steady and strong. Emily wiped her tears and forced a small smile. "It's okay. I'll be fine. You're here, and that's enough." But things didn't stop with ruined books. The next few days became harder. The bullies found small ways to make Emily's life miserable. They pushed her shoulder in the hallway, whispered mean comments as she passed, and sometimes knocked things out of her hands. They laughed whenever she bent down to pick them up. Emily kept trying to ignore them, reminding herself of her father's words about standing tall. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't going to stop on its own. One Friday afternoon, everything changed. Emily stayed after class to finish a small project with the teacher. By the time she left, the hallways were almost empty. She walked toward the schoolyard with her bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't know that Chad and his group had been waiting for her. They stood near the gate, leaning against the wall with smirks on their faces. "Well, look who it is," Chad said as Emily approached. "The little new girl. Don't you ever get tired of hiding behind your dog?" His friends laughed. Emily didn't answer. She walked steadily, trying to keep her calm, but her heart was beating fast. She noticed they were blocking the way. Chad stepped forward and reached for her bag. "Let's see what you've got in here," he said, grabbing at the strap. Emily pulled back quickly, holding onto it with both hands. "Stop it," she said firmly, her voice louder than she expected. Chad raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so you do have a voice," he mocked. He tugged at the bag again, and Emily stumbled slightly. That was the moment Rex appeared. Emily's mother had parked nearby, letting Rex out of the car when she saw Emily coming. The German Shepherd ran toward Emily, his sharp eyes locked on Chad. Rex placed himself between Emily and the bullies, his strong frame blocking her completely. His ears were forward and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The bullies froze. They hadn't expected the dog to appear. Chad tried to laugh it off, though his face showed nervousness. "What's the big deal?" "It's just a dog," he said, stepping closer as if to prove his point. But Rex didn't move aside. His growl grew louder, his teeth showing just enough to send a clear message. Other students who were leaving after practice noticed what was happening and began to gather nearby. Whispers spread quickly. "That's the new girl's dog," someone said. "Look at him. He's not like a regular dog." Emily placed her hand gently on Rex's head and instantly he calmed slightly, though his eyes never left Chad. "Go home, Chad," she said, her voice firm. "I don't want trouble." But Chad, embarrassed by the crowd watching, refused to back down. "What are you going to do? Let your mutt fight your battles?" he snapped. Rex took one step forward, his body low and ready. The sound of his growl filled the air and Chad stopped moving. For the first time, his arrogance cracked. His friends shifted nervously, whispering that maybe they should leave. Chad hesitated, caught between pride and fear. Emily stood taller than before. She wasn't yelling, but her steady tone carried weight. "You think I'm weak because I don't fight back. But you don't know Rex, you don't know me." The tension in the air was thick and the crowd of students grew larger. Everyone could feel something was about to happen. Rex's loyalty and strength were no longer a quiet secret. He had revealed just enough to make everyone realize this wasn't just any ordinary German Shepherd. The bullies were no longer in control. Emily looked at Rex, then back at Chad. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. She knew the days of being an easy target were coming to an end. Emily woke up the next morning with a different kind of feeling. She was still nervous about going to school, but something inside her had shifted after the moment with Rex and the bullies. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't standing alone anymore. The memory of Rex placing himself between her and Chad was burned in her mind. His growl, his steady presence, and the way the bullies froze had shown her that she wasn't as powerless as they thought. She knew the bullies would not give up, but she also knew Rex would never let them harm her. That thought gave her courage. When she arrived at school, whispers followed her through the hallway. Students who had been there yesterday were already talking about what they had seen. Some said Rex looked like a trained guard dog. Others said they had never seen Chad look so shaken. Emily walked quietly, keeping her head down as usual, but this time she could hear a difference in the whispers. Not all of them were mocking. Some carried tones of surprise, maybe even respect. In class, the teacher gave instructions for a group project. Emily's name was called to join a group of students she didn't know. She sat down nervously, waiting for them to complain about having to work with her. But instead, one girl smiled faintly and said, "I saw your dog yesterday. He's amazing." Emily blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. She simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you." It was a small moment, but it gave her hope that not everyone was against her. At lunch, Emily went to her usual spot outside. Rex sat next to her, his ears alert but his body calm. She shared her sandwich with him again, smiling as he wagged his tail. A few students passed by and stared, but this time their expressions weren't full of laughter. Some even stopped to watch, whispering to each other in curiosity. Rex ignored them, focused only on Emily, and that made her feel safe. But peace never lasted long when it came to Chad and his group. They appeared from the side of the courtyard, walking toward Emily with that same arrogant energy. Chad's face showed a hint of anger, as if he was still embarrassed by what had happened yesterday. He wasn't about to let people think he had been defeated by a girl and her dog. "Well, look who's sitting here like a queen with her guard dog," Chad sneered. "You think you're better than us now, huh?" His friends laughed, though their voices didn't carry as much confidence as before. Emily didn't respond. She simply placed her hand on Rex's back. The dog stayed calm, his eyes fixed on the bullies. Chad smirked and pulled something from his pocket, a tennis ball. He tossed it lightly toward Rex as if daring him to react. The ball bounced on the ground and rolled near Rex's paws. The German Shepherd didn't move. He kept his eyes locked on Chad, his muscles tense, his growl low but steady. The calm, controlled way Rex refused to be distracted made several students watching gasp softly. Emily's voice was steady as she spoke. "Leave us alone, Chad. She didn't shout, but her words carried strength. The crowd around them grew. More students had noticed what was happening, and whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Chad, desperate to save face, stepped closer. He pointed at Rex. "That dog doesn't scare me. He's just a dumb animal. You think he's tough? Let's see what he does if I get too close." He reached his hand forward, pretending to grab at Emily's bag again. That was the moment Rex stood up. His body shifted forward in a single, powerful motion. His chest was broad, his stance steady, and his growl deepened into something that sent chills through the air. The sound was not wild, but trained, controlled, and purposeful. It was the kind of growl that warned with certainty. One more step and action would follow. Chad froze for a second. His hand hung in the air, and for the first time, real fear crossed his face. His friends whispered nervously behind him, urging him to stop. The crowd of students went silent, all eyes on the standoff. Emily stood up slowly, keeping her hand on Rex. She looked directly at Chad. "He's not just a dog. He's my protector, and you don't know what he's capable of." The tension was unbearable. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was holding its breath. Chad tried to laugh, but his voice cracked slightly. "What, you think he's some kind of soldier dog or something?" He scoffed, but his words didn't sound convincing anymore. Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rex's presence was answer enough. His controlled stance, his unshakable gaze, and the quiet power in his body made it clear that he wasn't a normal pet. He was trained, and he was deadly serious about protecting Emily. Finally, Chad dropped his hand and stepped back. "Fine," he muttered, trying to cover his fear with arrogance. "But this isn't over." He turned sharply and walked away, his friends following quickly behind him. The crowd erupted in whispers again, this time louder than before. Students began talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Emily sat down again, her heart racing. She stroked Rex's fur, whispering, "Good boy. You didn't even have to touch him, and he ran." Rex wagged his tail, finally relaxing now that the threat had passed. That evening, when Emily walked home with Rex, she felt different. She still carried the weight of being new and lonely, but she also carried something new: respect. She realized people were beginning to see her in a different light, not just as a shy girl who never spoke, but as someone strong, someone who had a protector no bully could break. At home, Emily's mother noticed the change in her daughter's face. "You seem lighter today," she said gently as she prepared dinner. Emily smiled faintly. "It's Rex. Everyone saw what he did. They know now." Her mother nodded knowingly. "Your father trained him well. He always wanted Rex to watch over you." That night, Emily lay in bed with Rex curled up by the door like always. But this time she didn't just feel safe. She felt powerful too. She understood that she wasn't fighting this battle alone. With Rex by her side, she could face the bullies no matter how far they pushed. And deep down, Emily knew that sooner or later, Chad would try again. But she also knew that when that time came, Rex would be ready. And so would she. The next week at school started with an unusual atmosphere. Emily could feel it the moment she walked through the tall double doors. Students who once ignored her now looked at her with curiosity. Some whispered. Others gave her small nods of respect. It wasn't because she had suddenly changed, but because of what everyone had seen. The story of Rex standing firm against Chad had spread through the hallways like wildfire. People said the new girl wasn't as weak as she looked, and her German Shepherd was no ordinary dog. Emily tried not to let the attention overwhelm her. She kept her usual quiet pace, books in hand, and avoided eye contact whenever possible. But deep down, she felt a new strength growing inside her. She wasn't invisible anymore, and the bullies could no longer treat her as if she had no power. Rex had made sure of that. Still, she knew Chad wouldn't accept defeat so easily. His pride had been hurt in front of too many people. He had always been the one others feared, the one who controlled the crowd with his arrogance and wealth. To be humiliated by a new girl and her dog was something he couldn't allow to stand. His anger simmered all week, and he started whispering plans with his group. On Friday afternoon, just as classes ended, Emily walked to the schoolyard with Rex waiting patiently outside. She spotted Chad leaning against the wall near the exit with a smirk on his face. His group surrounded him, their laughter loud and forced. Students sensed that something was about to happen, and a crowd began to gather again. Emily tightened her grip on Rex's leash and took a steady breath. She told herself to stay calm, to remember her father's words about strength. Rex's ears perked up as he sensed her unease. "Hey, new girl," Chad called out, his voice echoing across the yard. "We're not done yet. You think that mud of yours makes you special? Today I'm going to prove you wrong." His words carried arrogance, but there was also a shadow of desperation in them. Emily didn't answer. She kept walking, but Chad stepped into her path, blocking the way. His friends formed a half-circle around them, closing off her escape. The crowd grew larger, students whispering in excitement, their eyes fixed on what was about to unfold. "Let's see what happens when I step closer," Chad sneered, moving toward Emily. He raised his arms in a mocking stance, pretending he was about to grab her. His friends cheered him on, though some looked nervous. That was the moment Rex stepped forward. He didn't bark wildly or snap like an untrained dog. Instead, he moved with sharp precision, lowering his body slightly, his eyes locked on Chad's every move. A growl rolled out from his chest, low, steady, and powerful. It wasn't the sound of fear. It was the sound of a fighter trained to protect. The effect was immediate. The crowd hushed, their whispers silenced by the sheer intensity of Rex's presence. Chad tried to keep his smirk, but sweat began to form on his forehead. "Oh, come on, he's just bluffing," he said, his voice trembling slightly. He lunged forward, pretending to grab Emily's shoulder. In an instant, Rex reacted. His powerful body surged forward, forcing Chad back a step. Rex's movements were swift but controlled, just as he had been trained. He didn't bite, but his strength was enough to knock Chad off balance. Chad stumbled, nearly falling to the ground, and gasps rippled through the crowd. Chad scrambled back, his eyes wide with shock. Rex stood tall, his body between Emily and the bullies, his growl deepening as if daring them to try again. The bullies froze, unsure of what to do. For the first time, their leader didn't look untouchable. Emily's heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. "Stop this, Chad. You can't scare me anymore, and you'll never scare Rex." Her words carried more strength than she had ever spoken before. She wasn't just defending herself, she was standing tall. Chad's pride burned, but he couldn't ignore the truth. He had just been pushed back by a dog who hadn't even used his full strength. The crowd erupted in whispers, some laughing quietly, others shaking their heads at Chad's foolishness. "You think you've won?" Chad snapped, his voice sharp with frustration. "This isn't over." But his words carried little power now. He stepped back, his face red, and shoved his way through the crowd with his friends trailing behind him. The students cheered softly, some even clapping. Emily stood still, her hand resting on Rex's head as he finally calmed down. She felt her chest swell with pride. For the first time, she didn't feel like the new, helpless girl anymore. She felt like someone who could stand her ground. That evening, as Emily walked home with Rex, she thought about everything that had happened. She remembered the way Rex had moved, so controlled, so precise. It was as if her father was still guiding him from beyond, making sure his daughter was never left unprotected. Emily whispered softly to Rex, "You're more than just a dog. You're my shield, my fighter." Rex wagged his tail, his eyes warm and loyal. When she got home, her mother listened carefully as Emily told her the whole story. Instead of worrying, her mother nodded. "Your father trained Rex for moments like this," she said. "He knew the world could be cruel, but he wanted you to have someone who would always stand with you." Emily realized then that Rex wasn't just her companion. He was her father's legacy. Every move he made, every protective growl, was a reminder of the love her father had poured into training him. And now, that love was guarding her every single day. The next morning at school, everything felt different. Students who once avoided her now looked at her with admiration. Some came up to her asking about Rex. "Is he really trained?" one boy asked. Emily simply nodded. She didn't need to brag. Rex had already proven himself. But Emily also knew this wasn't the end. Chad had lost face, and people like him rarely walked away quietly. He would try again, maybe in a different way. She didn't know when, but she knew Rex would be ready. And this time, so would she. As she sat in class, Emily smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. The bullies had tried to break her, but instead, they had revealed her strength. With Rex at her side, she no longer felt like the shy new girl. She felt like someone who could stand up to anything. The school might still be new, the faces around her might still be unfamiliar, but she knew one thing for certain: she was not alone. And that made all the difference. The days after the schoolyard confrontation felt different for Emily. For the first time since she had moved to this new town, she felt as though people were beginning to see her in a new light. The whispers that once carried mockery and cruel jokes had shifted into tones of curiosity and even admiration. Students stopped her in the hallway not to laugh at her, but to ask about Rex. Some wanted to know if he had really been trained like a guard dog, while others just wanted to pet him when she brought him along after school. Emily didn't say much, but her small nods and quiet smiles were enough. She could feel that the wall of loneliness around her was slowly beginning to crack. Rex had become somewhat of a legend in the school. People told the story of how he had stood his ground against Chad, how his growl had silenced an entire crowd, and how he had pushed the school bully back without even needing to bite. To many students, it felt like justice had been served. For too long, Chad and his group had ruled the hallways with arrogance and fear. Now they had finally met their match, and it wasn't another tough student, but a loyal German shepherd and a quiet girl who refused to be broken. But Emily knew Chad wasn't finished. He walked the halls with a stormy expression, his pride wounded deeply. His friends stuck close to him, but even they seemed less confident now. Every time Rex's name came up in conversation, Chad's face grew red with anger. He hated the idea that people were laughing at him, that his reputation had been cracked. Emily could sense the tension building, but she didn't let it frighten her anymore. She had Rex, and that was enough. One afternoon, the school announced an assembly in the gymnasium. The entire student body gathered, filling the bleachers with chatter and noise. Emily sat quietly near the middle, her books balanced on her lap. She noticed Chad a few rows away, whispering angrily to his friends. She pretended not to see, focusing instead on the principal's speech, but she had learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts told her trouble was close. Sure enough, after the assembly ended and students began to leave, Chad and his group moved toward her. The crowd thinned, and Emily found herself near the exit doors with them blocking her path. "Think you're special because of your dog?" Chad sneered, his voice low but sharp. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "Do you know who my father is? Do you know what happens to people who make me look weak?" His words dripped with anger, but there was also desperation in them. Emily's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. "I don't need to know who your father is," she said softly. "I know who mine was." Her words made Chad pause for a moment, confused. Emily continued, her voice steady. "My father was a soldier. He trained Rex to protect me, to stand by me no matter what. That's something your money can't buy." Before Chad could respond, a familiar sound echoed through the gym doors. Rex's claws tapped against the floor as he trotted in, his ears perked and his eyes focused on Emily. Her mother had come to pick her up and allowed Rex to come find her. The sight of the German shepherd instantly changed the atmosphere. Chad stiffened, his bravado faltering as Rex moved to Emily's side. The dog's stance was calm but alert, his gaze locked firmly on the group of bullies. The crowd of students who had lingered to watch began whispering again. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Chad's pride was on the line and Rex was ready. Chad tried to laugh, though it came out shaky. "So what? You hide behind your dog every time?" But his words lacked the strength they once carried. He stepped forward, perhaps hoping to prove he wasn't afraid. Rex moved instantly, his body shifting into a protective stance. His growl rolled through the air, deep and commanding. The sound froze Chad in his tracks. This time Rex didn't just stand his ground, he advanced. With a swift movement, he lunged forward, stopping just inches from Chad. The sudden motion forced Chad to stumble backward and fall onto the floor. Gasps and laughter filled the gym as students watched the once powerful bully scramble away on his hands and feet, his face pale with fear. Rex stood over him, not touching, but making it absolutely clear who held the power now. His growl softened into silence only when Emily placed her hand gently on his back. "That's enough, Rex," she whispered. Instantly, Rex relaxed, stepping back to Emily's side, his eyes never leaving Chad. The crowd erupted into cheers and claps. For the first time, it wasn't laughter at Emily's expense, it was laughter at Chad's. His friends pulled him up quickly, but the damage was done. His reign as the untouchable bully had ended in front of the entire school. He had been brought down not by fists or by another tough student, but by his own arrogance and a dog's unshakable loyalty. Emily stood tall, her hand resting on Rex's head. She didn't need to say anything. The scene spoke for itself. She turned and walked out of the gym with Rex beside her, leaving the whispers and cheers behind her. That evening at home, Emily sat with her mother and told her everything that had happened. Her mother listened quietly, then smiled warmly. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. "He trained Rex to be your protector, but he also trained you to be brave. Today you proved both." Emily hugged Rex tightly, feeling the warmth of his fur and the steady beat of his heart. "I couldn't have done it without him," she whispered. Rex wagged his tail and licked her hand as if to say he would always be there. From that day on, Emily's life at school changed completely. She was no longer the shy new girl that bullies could mock. She had earned respect, not just because of Rex's strength, but because of her own courage to stand tall. She began making friends, students who admired her quiet strength and wanted to know her better. As for Chad, he never dared to cross her path again. His pride had been shattered too many times, and the memory of Rex's growl haunted him. The other bullies slowly drifted away, leaving Emily free to focus on her studies and her new friendships. Emily understood something important then. Strength didn't always come from fighting back with anger. Sometimes it came from standing firm, from knowing who you were, and from having the loyalty of someone who would never abandon you. Rex was more than a pet. He was her partner, her shield, her connection to her father, and her reminder that she was never truly alone. And so, the new girl who had once been invisible walked the halls with quiet confidence. She didn't need to shout or prove herself anymore. She had already proven everything the moment Rex stood by her side and showed the world that no bully could ever break them.